This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Bruschi, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
Brian Walsh is on trial right now in Massachusetts for the murder of his wife, Ana, the mother of three who vanished on New Year's Day in 2023. Her body has never been found, but here's what makes this case legally fascinating. 2 weeks ago, right before jury selection, Walsh pled guilty to disposing of Ana's body and lying to police. He admitted that he dismembered her. He just says he didn't kill her. The defense is arguing Ana died suddenly in bed. No explanation, no cause, and no body. Walsh panicked. Meanwhile, prosecutors have internet searches from his laptop starting at 4:52 in the morning on the day she disappeared, including queries like best way to dispose of a body and research into a serial killer known as the trash bag killer. Surprise! Trash bags are involved in this story, too. They also have a $2.7 million life insurance policy with Walsh as a sole beneficiary and evidence he knew his wife was having an affair. To break all this down, we're joined by defense attorney and former prosecutor Eric Faddis. The defense in this case has made some very bold choices here, arguably some of the boldest that we've seen. They had their client plead guilty to body disposal and obstruction right before trial, and now they're asking a jury to believe Ana Walsh just dropped dead for no reason, and her husband's only crime was a really bad cover-up. Eric, I want to start with the defense strategy here, because from the outside, this looks like a real high-wire act. Walk me through the decision to have Walsh plead guilty to the lesser charges right before trial. What's the tactical thinking here? Is this about limiting what evidence the jury sees, or is this something else?
You know, it's a little puzzling to me, Tony, but I think there are possible rationales. You know, one is, like you said, if he's already pled guilty to obstruction and to disposing of the body, his team might argue to the judge, hey, we don't need evidence of those issues. Those have been decided. The jury doesn't have to determine that. So it's not relevant. I'm not sure the judge is going to go along with that, but the judge might limit some of that evidence. Additionally, sometimes defense will sort of cop to what they can't deny. You know, the obstruction and the deception, and then the cover up afterwards. Perhaps defense just thought, hey, those are too insurmountable. We need to come to this jury and say, hey, my client's taking responsibility for what he did, but he's not going to plead guilty to something he didn't do, and he didn't kill her. I imagine that the defense will go something like that.
But how do you justify what he claims to have done with the body? I mean, that's like, where is she? How do you reconcile where is she?
You know, that's a tough one. I think his defense team is probably going to look at it and say, hey, he panicked. This was a chaotic situation. He didn't know what to do, and he knew that fingers might be pointed at him. You know, he is the spouse. That's the first person they look to when another spouse is missing or dead. And then on top of that, there was some infidelity allegedly going on. There were some marital issues, and I think defense is going to argue, hey, he thought all signs were going to point to him, and he panicked and made a stupid decision, but that stupid decision wasn't killing her. I think it'll go something like that.
It's kind of like, he's a dumbass, but he's not quite that much. But
right.
Maybe he is. It's like, he's not a murderer. He's a dumbass, but he's not a murderer. It's basically the argument. They're arguing sudden, unexplained death, which it's not really a thing, but okay. And Ana just died in bed and Walsh found her. As a former prosecutor, how would you attack this theory? And also as a defense attorney, how do you sell it to a jury when the client then dismembered her?
Yeah, you know, from a prosecutorial perspective, you know, I think you look at it and you sort of convey to the jury that, hey, this guy's a liar. He's been lying since the beginning of this. And so now he's sort of contrived this fabricated defense of something that isn't really foundational in medical science. As unexplained death, that's not a thing, at least according to the prosecution. And so they're going to say, hey, look, this is a last last-ditch Hail Mary to try to get out of this murder trial. You shouldn't believe them. On the defense side, I think they're going to say, hey, unexplained weird medical stuff happens. And I think they have an expert, according to their opening statement, that might testify about that, and to sort of say to the jury, hey, look, even though weird stuff does go down, that doesn't mean it's impossible. And if it's not impossible, is that some modicum of doubt? And is it sufficient doubt to acquit him? That's what the jury would say.
Is it possible but reasonable? That's what it's going to come down to. And those two things can be confusing to a jury sometimes, can they not? I mean, reasonable doubt is the bar here, or beyond a reasonable doubt is the bar here. But is this a reasonable expectation to think that a jury is going to buy this? Walsh is arguing that the defense attorney, Larry Tipton, is telling the jury that Walsh never thought anybody would believe that Ana was alive one minute and dead the next. So he's saying that he thinks that no one's going to buy this, even though it happened. No one's going to buy it. Is that actually a viable argument that an innocent man would choose dismemberment of his wife, this person he supposedly loves and cares about? The kids are in the next room eating McDonald's. Let's go chop up mom. I mean, over calling 911. It's going to be the worst decision in the world. Really, they're trying to argue and make that this was some sort of real, legit reaction.
Some grisly circumstances for sure. And that reasonable piece is so critical, Tony, because they can't acquit just if there's any doubt. It has to be reasonable doubt. And the way I would address that as a prosecutor in trials is I would say, hey, let's say I told you that my name is Eric Faddis, and I had my mother come in here and she says, hey, I birthed Eric Faddis. And I show you my state-issued driver's license. I show you bank accounts. I show you all of this information. Is it possible that I hired some body double to come in and tell you that they're Eric Faddis? I guess that's possible, but is that reasonable? And usually juries have a pretty good sense as to what's reasonable and what's not.
Would you as a prosecutor, would you sit with the jury and say, let's talk about the act of physically dismembering another human being? What would actually go into it? Would you maybe walk through that process to show how involved he had to be in this process? It wasn't that he just stuck her in a bag and took her outside. This took time. This took effort. He probably even broke a sweat. I mean, would you go through that kind of a thought process with the jury, or just let them imagine it?
Stacey, I would, in painstaking detail, go through every act and sub-act that had to be completed in order to accomplish what was accomplished here. And so, we're talking about, cutting into the flesh. We're talking about separating limbs. You have blood everywhere, presumably, and you have to then put it into bags. This is your partner. This is the person who is mothering your children, and to just show how calculated and contemplative that must have been to go through that, sort of undercuts this notion that it was just a freak panic and he didn't know what he was doing and he freaked out. It seems much more intentional and thoughtful than that.
Yeah.
The defense says experts are going to testify. Now, you just mentioned it too, that someone's going to come in and say this sudden unexplained death is real. What kind of expert testimony would it take, would you need to make this credible? And I'm wondering how difficult that can be without a body, without any medical evidence. I mean, the only thing that comes to mind, and Bob Motta brought it up on the show the other day, of his theory is they might go down the COVID route. The COVID card was found in the trash, so it shows she got a shot at some point. And that might not be a horrible route. We don't know that they're going to go down that route, but there's been people that have claimed that they died, or someone they know died. People have had things just after taking that shot, and they try to attribute it back to the shot. I don't know, how much medical research you have that can back something like that up, or even if they'd go down that route. But if you were defending this, would that be an angle that you might take when you literally have nothing to back up your claim?
You've got to look at all potential angles as defense on this one. And what we're talking about is cause of death. And so typically the type of expert you would get is a forensic pathologist who opines on cause of death. Now, they probably didn't conduct any examination of remains or anything like that. And also what they're going to be asserting is kind of almost like a non-occurrence, almost like I can't tell you what the condition is. I can't tell you what the circumstances were. It was nothing or undetermined or unexplained. And I think it's going to be difficult for a jury if they want something to be able to hang their hat on in terms of reasonable doubt. And here, just saying we've got no idea, how strong is that? I'm not sure how strong that is.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel strong, but you never know. I mean, no case is truly a slam dunk. Tipton, his attorney, has acknowledged in open court that his client, they're owning a lot of the BS here. They're owning it, saying, yeah, he lied to police in every single interview. Yes, he had the art fraud thing going on. That's made it into this trial. How do you rehabilitate a client's credibility who's basically known as a fraudster in the art world, a liar to the police, with a jury after conceding he's a liar? But he's a liar, but we want you to believe the biggest bullshit story any of you have probably ever heard. But that's true. I mean, how do you go about that?
From the defense side, Tony, it's certainly tough, but I think you say, something like, he is a liar. You own it, and you say, "Hey, he's admitted to it. He's pled guilty to deceiving police on this. He's a liar, but he's not on trial for lying. He's on trial for killing her. And if you don't have a cause of death and you don't have sort of surrounding circumstances, how can you convict on that? Just by saying, "Oh, this guy's deceptive. We can't believe what he's saying." Okay, that's fine, but the prosecution has to have a counter narrative, has to have evidence that counters that, that shows actually how the murder was committed, or at least that a murder was committed. And I think that's sort of the road you go down is, hey, you might think he's a scoundrel, but he's not on trial for being a scoundrel.
But why believe him about that? If he's a liar in all these other aspects, how can you put that forth to a jury and go, well, believe him on this part. He didn't kill her. We have to believe him here, but everything else he does, well, that was bullshit because he's just a big liar and a scammer. So how do you convince them that, well, this is the one thing he didn't lie about, guys?
Certainly going to be a question in the juror's mind. And perhaps that is where the guilty pleas come in. Perhaps his defense gets up there and says, hey, this guy has a checkered background when it comes to veracity. But when it came down to it, right before this trial, he owned up. He took responsibility. He told you what he did. And you can believe him on those things. And he's made a change, and he's going to be truthful about, he's not going to say he did something he didn't do. He's already copped to these serious things. And the reason he didn't cop to the murder is because he didn't do it. I think it goes something like that.
Dang.
The defense is they're pushing back on the affair motive. I know that's part of what the prosecution is pushing here, claiming that Walsh didn't know about Anna's relationship. I mean, it feels like they're going to be caught in a lie in the middle of saying we don't lie, even though we're a bunch of lying liars who've lied. Mm-hmm. Walsh didn't know about Anna's relationship with William Fastow. The problem with that, prosecutors say, is his phone searched for Fastow's name on Christmas Day.
Oops.
Whoops. I mean, there's ways, I guess, you could argue that. I mean, you'd be curious. Think anyone your spouse is out working with somebody. Well, who is this person? You might, do a little Google search. Let's look at their Facebook page. What are they up to? Who are they? Is that kind of what they're going to try and pitch to this jury, that he didn't know about this affair? Because you got that, and you also got the allegations that mom was hiring a PI to look into an affair. So there appears to be evidence that there's at least suspicion of an affair. How do you counter this as a defense attorney?
If I'm defense, I'm saying, is this suspicion or is this curiosity? Is it wanting to know more about the people with whom your partner is associating and spending time? I suppose the same actions could have been taken if the female spouse was hanging out with another female colleague. It wouldn't be unusual for the male partner to search that person and say, hey, my wife spent a lot of time with this gal, and my wife is straight. But I want to know a little bit more. I think that's the horse the defense is going to ride, but that there is some evidence that sort of undercuts that.
Feels like a horse with a broken leg that's waiting for the glue factory. It just kind of seems like it's there. If you were defending Walshe, would you put him on the stand? He's the only person who can tell the jury what happened that night in a very convoluted case, but he's also a convicted fraudster who's already admitted to lying repeatedly.
This is a tough call especially on this case, Tony, because the jury's going to have this cognitive dissonance in their head, right? They're going to say, hey, this guy admitted to covering up the whole thing and butchering his deceased wife's body. And on top of that, he lied to police about it. So what was going on? How can you make this make sense to where he didn't commit the murder, but he did all these other things? The way that you possibly make it make sense is you have the client get up there and explain. And the client would explain his side, his thought process, his rationale at the time. But there are a ton of pitfalls there, including the acts of dishonesty, the prior fraud, and then the obstruction of justice, the deception to the police. I imagine he'd be cross-examined on those things. And so how believable is this guy going to be with that backdrop?
I think that's a big question. We really haven't seen him speak I can't think of any time I've seen him other than just a few word answers in court. I haven't seen any examples of just how he is in public speaking. Obviously, was able to defraud people out of money for the Andy Warhol of fake paintings and such. So he's got to, I would think, have somewhat of a silver tongue going on. But again, that's quite, it's not something you can just go and say carte blanche. Yes, you're going to be great on the stand because you're the only one who can tell the story. It's very much going to depend on how good of a public speaker he's going to be. Judging by him so far, I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith. What's your read on the guy so far?
Sometimes when you have a client who is a little more sophisticated, who might be of a certain social strata or economic strata, sometimes they know how to make a decent impression. Sometimes they can talk, especially if they're dealing with high dollar amounts and whatever they're doing, even if it's fraud, they can articulate, they can express themselves well, as opposed to someone who perhaps doesn't have that kind of background. And so that tends to lean in favor of it might make sense to call him to testify. But yeah, that being said, it's kind of a wild card in this because we haven't really heard much from him at all.
I just wonder if he is a smooth talker, if he could talk people into buying these fake Andy Warhols. Maybe he is really charismatic. He's got the riz going on.
Smooth operator.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a smooth operator. I just couldn't picture him in the music video. He doesn't seem like the person they'd cast for that role. I don't see it.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.